I had to crawl through my mom's blood to get to the pantry. We didn't eat or drink much during that time. That is a quote from Sarah Weaver, as quoted in the Bonner County Daily Bee, September 4th, 2010. And welcome to another fantastic-ish, somber-ish episode of Anarchy Among Friends Roundtable discussion. Before we get started, let me first remind you that we are covered by the BIPCOT no government license, which allows for the use and reuse of this podcast by anyone and everyone except for governments and the bludgies thereof. You can learn more about that at bipcot.org. That is bipcot.org. We're also protected by Brandenburg v. Ohio, 1969, which ruled that the government cannot punish inflammatory speech unless that speech is, quote, directed to inciting or producing imminent lawless action and is likely to incite or produce such action. Therefore, everything said here on Anarchy Among Friends Roundtable discussion is entirely hypothetical. Yeah, I think this is episode 147. I think that's what it was. And
I have no idea.
It's the anniversary of Vicki Weaver's murder at Ruby Ridge. Yay.
Yeah, happy anniversary.
She was shot holding her infant in the back of the head.
Yep. And then her body decomposed in front of her children and husband
For the next
days.
For the next for the next week.
As they taunted her, the dead woman, the woman that they had just shot.
Over the loudspeaker, Vicki, we're having pancakes. Would you and the kids like some pancakes? Just come out of the cabin, Vicki. My God, dude, I watched the documentary that right before coming on, and after reading some articles about it, and yeah, I'm not in the best of moods.
It's
understandable.
What's the daughter's name?
Which the oldest one is Sarah.
Yep, Sarah.
And then,
okay.
And then Samuel, and then there was Rachel, and then the baby is Elishba.
Yeah, it's Sarah. I think that I saw an interview with where she actually walked through.
Sarah's the family spokesman.
Yeah, she walks through everything.
Yeah, she's the only one you'll see talking about it.
Yeah, she points to the holes in the outbuilding where the rounds hit when they shot at her dad. I think Randy was just getting wood or something.
No, he went to visit Samuel's body.
Oh, that's what he's doing.
Body
that's
was
right.
in the shed.
Yeah, and they took pot shots at him, and
no, we'll get into all that. But yeah, he was reaching up to unlock the shed, so he could go in and visit Samuel's body, and Lon Harachi took a shot, and it went through his back and came out in his armpit, and then yeah.
So let's start at the beginning.
I don't want to start at the beginning of the story. I hate this story.
I know. This is one of those things I have to disassociate from or compartmentalize, or it'll make me fucking crazy thinking about it.
Yep.
This one in Waco.
You gotta get closer to your mic or something, man.
Chris.
Or figure out your mic. So, we got a couple different articles. Like there's a really good one at from ammo.com. I don't know if you guys follow their blog. Their blog is fantastic. And then let's see, where was the other one? That was the other one I was going to use. But so yeah, let's see. Where do we start? Randy Weaver was in many ways a typical American story. He grew up in Iowa farming community. He got decent grades in high school and played football. His family attended church regularly. He dropped out of community college and joined the United States Army in 1970. He was I believe it was a Green Beret.
Yep.
Vietnam.
Did some stuff over there, and after 3 years, he was honorably discharged. 1 month later, he married Victoria Jordanson. This is Vicki. He enrolled at the University of Northern Iowa, studying criminal justice with eyes toward becoming an FBI agent.
Hashtag irony.
Yeah. He dropped out because tuition was too expensive. This is the late 1970s. Right, there was the recession was going on. It was just gone off the gold standard, thanks to Nixon, and this Cold War was just ramping up. So I mean, there was a lot of not good things going on. He ended up working at a John Deere plant while his wife worked as a secretary before she eventually became a homemaker.
Oh yeah, because he was in Iowa, so it would have been the main John Deere plant in the Quad Cities.
Yeah.
Is my audio better?
Yeah,
Yes.
sounds better.
All right.
Give us a check.
Check 1 2.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah.
Fine. We are the most professional podcast.
Yes.
Always.
Reigning champs.
What would an episode of the show not be if it weren't for technical problems? Whether it's Andrew or myself.
You
Profitable.
think at some
Or
point,
your internet.
at some
Or my
point we
internet.
would have figured this shit out, but no.
Yeah, you did 147 episodes. We still have no fucking idea what we're doing. It's...
Yeah.
Both of the Weavers increasingly became apocalyptic in their views of the world. This, combined with an increasing emphasis on the Old Testament-based Christianity, led them to seek a life away from mainstream America, a life of self-reliance. Vicki, in particular, had strong visions of her family surviving the apocalypse through life far away from what they viewed as a corrupt world. To that end, Randy purchased a 20-acre farm in Ruby Ridge, Idaho, and they ended up building a cabin there. All right, so this is when the Cold War is just starting to ramp up. Vietnam, like Randy, he served in Vietnam. There's still all the stuff coming from Vietnam, and all the stuff that they're dealing with, right? And
the economy is shit in the bed.
economy is shit in the bed. And there's all the
so they had reason to believe the way that they did. This was not unreasonable.
You know, there's things that are happening in the government, and the government's changing. The government, you know, they just went off the
Gold standard.
off the gold standard, and also so there's a big migratory push at that time. Also, a lot of immigration coming in. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and they were seeking answers, and that's where they found the answers.
Well, yeah, and they also were watching, because this is, you know, now the EU is something that's very, you know, common in every day, but at this time, this is when the Xinjiang zone was starting to become a thing, and they were starting to talk about creating a single European government and a single European currency, which plays right into the whole one world government thing pretty easily. And so they're looking at that and going, holy shit. And, you know, the Soviet Union's starting to make lots and lots of moves, Central America and Southeast Asia, and the United States is making a lot of moves there as well. So it's like,
China's also getting really big at this point in time also.
Yeah, it's a tumultuous time in the world.
So 20 acres, Ruby Ridge. The land was purchased for $5,000 in cash and the trade of the truck they used to move there. After moving to Ruby Ridge, Weaver became acquainted with members of the Aryan nations in nearby Hayden Lake. He even attended some rallies the FBI believed his involvement in the church was much deeper than it actually was. They thought he was a regular congregant of the Aryan nations and had attended Aryan Nations World Congress. Okay. They actually only attended 4 or 5 events in like 6 years or whatever it was.
Yeah, not very often.
I mean,
like invited by somebody that they were acquaintances or friends with, type of.
The area that they moved to, Ruby Ridge, Idaho, this is the Idaho Panhandle. They're only like 40 miles from the Canadian border.
Right.
At this point in time, it was an extremely isolated area. Right. So I mean, we're talking 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So it's an extremely isolated area. There wasn't a whole lot of people there, and then after they moved there, then the Aryan Nation and some of those people moved there.
Gotcha.
Right? So these people were literally their neighbors. Right.
Yeah, it's not a big community. Everybody kind of knows everybody. Everybody interacts with everybody. It's an isolated place.
It is.
Does this one?
I've been through there several times because we used to go.
Yeah, they actually talk about it in Randy and Vicki were interviewed by the FBI in 1985 when Randy denied membership in the group, citing profound theological differences. The Weavers, who at some point had some points of agreement with the Aryan nations, primarily about the importance of the Old Testament, mostly saw their affiliation with the Aryan nation as a social outlet. Living off the grid, the nearby members of the Aryan nations were neighbors in the remote northern Idaho.
Yeah, right. Just because you go to meetings, just because you associate with your neighbors at one of these things, doesn't at any point mean that you actually believe anything that they're saying at this or anything else. You're just going to it. I mean, I can go to a thing with a bunch of Buddhists and go hang out with a bunch of Buddhists. It doesn't mean that I'm becoming a Buddhist. That's just me going to hang out with them because they're cool people. Otherwise,
one of the things that Randy said, or that Randy and Vicki said again and again and again, is that they weren't supremacists, right? They were separatists, which some people believe is a racist, whatever. But that's a whole different theological discussion. They're separatists,
but there's a million reasons to want to separate yourself from fucking modern society.
Yeah, they were afraid of big government. They were afraid of, in their words, Zog, Zionist occupied government. So I mean, I'm trying to say this without sounding racist. It's really hard. I don't think I can say it, but that was their fear, was Zog, was Zionist occupied government. They're afraid of the big Jewish conspiracy, the Jew world order and all that stuff.
Well, Zionism is a secular thing. It has very little to do with the religion.
That's what I was trying to get to. It's an extremist version of the Jewish faith, right? It's like
Westboro Baptist Church.
It's like
not representative of Christianity.
It's like blaming Westboro for all Christianity, or blaming suicide bombers for all of Muslim. Islam. It's such a minute, small, separatist extremist ideology that it doesn't represent
Judaism.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and but you can see where a lot of their ideals do, what their beliefs do align with the Aryan Brotherhood and things. Ironically, the emphasis in the Old Testament, which is all about Jews and them associating with associating with the Aryan nation.
Honestly, none of it really matters, because you know what? This is supposed to be America. You're supposed to be able to believe whatever the fuck you want to believe in this country, as long as you don't hurt anybody.
That's the other point I wanted to get to eventually, is they weren't trying to force this on people, right? Like they weren't parts of like the order or the actual Aryan nations. They weren't out there, beating people up, or skinheads.
Which is an incredibly important distinction. I mean, they're out there, they're saying their shit, they're speaking their minds, but they're not actively they're not infringing on anybody else's.
They're not hurting anyone
by doing so.
It's the same thing.
They're separatists, right? They moved to the mountain to get away from everything, to be separate from everything.
And I don't have to agree with everything somebody believes to know that they got fucking treated horribly and dealt a shitty hand by the government. I don't have to agree with everything that they fucking think.
They weren't like actively like trying to bring about the collapse of the government and replacement with some white supremacist government. They weren't
actually. It's funny you say that, because one of the books that helped, for lack of a better term, radicalized Vicki Weaver was Ayn Rand.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like they weren't trying to actively bring any of this about. They thought it was coming. And so they were like, I don't want to be in cities. I don't want to be around all these other people. Yeah, when this happens, because this is going to get bad. And I just want to be away from it. That's all they're doing. They're not hurting fucking anyone.
Well, and to put that in a more modern context, look at what happened in all the major cities last year. And this year, there are all kinds of houses for sale and stuff inside the cities. But you get into the small communities like where I live, and the housing market. I mean, there was a house just down the street from me the other day. sold for just about $200,000. As last year, this time it would have been probably $125,000 house.
Yeah, the housing market is blowing up where we're at too.
Yeah, because everybody's trying to flee.
Right. Yeah, they're fleeing the cities. We bought our house like 4 years ago for $379, and I could probably put it on the market for like $490 now. You know, $500 because of all the shit we've done to it, but still, the housing market's going insane.
So,
and there's nothing available.
And it wasn't like all peachy with the Aryan Nation, because he did have issues with one of his neighbors, and that neighbor wrote a called the Secret Service and said that Randy and Vicki threatened to kill Ronald Reagan, and then like 2 or 3 other celebrities, and that's why they were interviewed in '85. Because their neighbor was upset. And
if they actually were wannabe fascists, neo-Nazis, of all the people they wouldn't want to assassinate, Ronald fucking Reagan would be at the top of that list.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That dude, like, Reaganism was the era of, America with the jackboot wearing fascist thugs. You know what I mean? Like, that was, very much an American supremacist era. And
which makes me laugh really, really hard whenever you hear people, especially conservatives, going, Ronald Reagan, best president ever. It's like, are you serious?
Yeah, they have no idea.
No.
Absolutely,
they have no clue.
So,
let's see, where was I? In July 1986, Randy met informant Kenneth Fadley, Fadley, Fadley. Informant Kevin Fadley, using the alias Gus Magnesio, who they met several times over the next 3 years. In October 1989, after a conversation in which Randy foresaw an imminent war with the Soviet Union and complained for the upteenth time about, quote, the world going down the tubes, the two men discussed a deal in which the hard-up Weaver, because, Randy wasn't working, there's still the economy issue. Idaho, there's no real jobs because there's not a lot of people up there, so they were hard up for money.
Well, yeah, he lives in a cabin with no power, running water on top of a mountain.
Yeah, little plywood cabin.
Yeah, like, what's he gonna do for work?
Let's see. Hard up Weaver that he would sell Fadley 2 sawed-off shotguns. Family claimed that Weaver proposed the deal. Randy says that it was the other way around. 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks later in a city park, Weaver presented Fadley with the 2 shotguns. So we can go the anarcho route here and say that his property, cut it however short he wants, blah blah blah, whatever. That.
Well, and keep in mind, this was what year was this?
1989.
99. So
89
or 89. So keep in mind, just 3 years prior. Right, just 3 years prior. Yeah, it would have been entirely legal for him to do that and just say, hey, make sure you pay your tax stamps, and then sell them to him without a problem. He would have been completely allowed to do that without an issue.
Yeah, and they'd been off the grid that whole time. Those whole 3 years plus, they'd been off the grid.
Right.
Yeah, Weaver also Weaver disputes that they were shortened. He says that they were entirely legal and that they were shortened after the fact.
Which is entirely possible.
The notes from the case also show that Fadley purchased the guns and showed Weaver where to shorten them, which would constitute illegal entrapment.
Yep, which means that the money exchanged hands, the guns therefore became Fadley's property, and then Fadley said, hey, commit this felony for me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Let's see. That was in. Let's see. The real purpose of the investigation was not to grab Weaver, but to use him to infiltrate a group in Montana, being organized by Charles Hallworth. In November 1989, Weaver refused to introduce Fadley to Hallworth, and Fadley ordered by his handlers to have no further contact with Weaver. So that was the whole thing. It was cut these shotguns down short. And then they can go, oh, look, Randy, you cut these too short. You're going to go to jail, and your family's going to be kicked off the land because we're going to confiscate that too. If you don't become an informant for us.
Yep, this is the exact same thing that they do every single day. They do it with kids who are, running money for drug dealers. They do it for drug dealers themselves. They do it with people who are doing all kinds of things just to try and squeeze some money out of the economy to try and make a living. And they entrap them, they get them, and then they lean on them and threaten them if they don't help. I mean, that's how John DeLorean, the guy who created the DeLorean cars, that's how he got entrapped. Was the guy who entrapped him had himself been entrapped and then leaned on by the FBI.
Yeah, right. I mean, we're not talking like he didn't hurt anybody, he didn't rip anybody off. These weren't like stolen firearms or nothing.
They're his guns.
All he did was cut some pieces of metal short.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. On his friend's gun when his friend asked him to.
Yeah.
Essentially is what this was.
Right. So that was in November 1989 when Randy said no. He wasn't going to introduce him. And then in June 1990, Federley's cover was blown. Right. So the informant got found out.
He got made.
It was then that the ATF reached out to Weaver, stating that they had evidence he was dealing illegal firearms. They told him they would drop all charges if he would agree to become a new informant regarding the investigation of the Aryan Nations group in that area. Weaver said no.
Yeah, turn on your neighbors and we'll let this go.
Right.
Yeah. Which is a big no.
Yeah. Especially, they already had a neighbor try to fucking turn them into the federal government for shit they didn't do.
Let's see. That was to coerce him into changing his mind, because that's going to work. The Fed staged a stunt where a broken down couple were on the side of the road. Weaver, being good neighbors, Weaver and Vicki and the girls, they pulled up next to them, try and help the couple, and they were handcuffed, thrown face down in the snow, and arrested. He had to post his house as bond, and still, again, refused to become a federal informant.
Well, yeah, because, again, remember, this guy is a former Green Beret. We don't get coerced. Yeah. You don't coerce us. That doesn't work. All that means is that we're going to hate you that much more and be that much more determined to fuck you hard.
Yeah.
Just plain and simple. That's how it works. And that's, and this is a guy who the federal government themselves poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into training in Vietnam, in, not being subject to being coerced, into not being able to be interrogated and things like that. Like, they put all that money into this guy, so they knew full well the kind of man he was. And then it wasn't going to work.
Yeah. So, okay, there's the irony of the federal government's desire to obtain information within the Aryan Nation is that different branches of the federal law enforcement and intelligence gathering occupied 5 of the 6 key positions in the organization at the time.
Oh my God.
Gee, that sounds familiar.
This means that the Aryan Nations were effectively a government-run shop, with agents spying on each other to ensure the integrity of an investigation into an organization ran almost entirely by the federal government.
Or
the Spider-Man meme comes to mind right now.
Right. Or the guys were like believing members of it.
Yeah.
And they're silencing Weaver because they think that he can take them down.
The government had an obsession with the Aryan Nations due to Robert J. Matthews. He was a member of the Order that was in the PNW, which included members of the Aryan Nations. The FBI hostage rescue team, the HRT, they actually burned Matthews alive inside his own home during a standoff.
Gosh, that doesn't sound familiar either.
Yeah.
Due to his ongoing refusal to snitch, Weaver was then arrested on January 1991 on the illegal firearms sales charge. These charges stemmed from Weaver's earlier, quote, sale of 2 shortened shotguns to Federley, the undercover ATF agent, a sale which the feds later admitted constituted illegal entrapment.
Yeah.
Gosh, does it?
That's like the fucking definition
Okay.
of entrapment.
Weaver's
The
court
government
date was
entrapping
set.
people?
Weaver's court date was set for February 19th, 1991. The next day, that was changed to February 20th, 1991. However, the note that Randy received read March 20th, 1991. Right. So he missed the February court appearance, and a bench warrant was issued for his arrest. The United States Marshal Service wanted to allow Weaver a chance to appear for what he thought was his court date. However, the United States Attorney's Office sought a grand jury indictment on March 14th, which was 6 days before the notice said he was due in court.
So, okay. So to recap here, they give him the wrong court date.
Okay, no. They give him a court date, which is February 19th, right? And then the next day, this is after Randy's gone, that court date gets changed to February 20th.
And again, he lives in a cabin on a mountain with no phone, no electricity, no running water.
The letter he receives says March 20th, not February 20th, which is the actual court date.
So they give him a letter that says the wrong court date. Mm-hmm. Then, rather than just go, oh, well, he's going to show up on this day because this is when we told him, which means that they knew they gave him the wrong court date.
Yes.
Instead, what they did is they went to a grand jury and got an indictment before he even had an opportunity to show up for the court date that they knew that they had informed him it was going to be.
So to me, what this sounds like is that the Aryan Nation had infiltrated these government agencies responsible for all these decisions that look deliberately designed to fucking end up with Randy Weaver dead. Like somebody fucking wanted him dead.
Yes. Yep. It was going way out of their way to do it.
That was the fear that Vicki had. And after missing the court date or the jury thing, whatever, the grand jury indictment, she actually wrote a letter addressed to the U.S. Attorney for Idaho that was addressed to the, quote, servant of the Queen of Babylon. That promised, quote, we will not bow to your evil commandments, we will live, or whether we will die. Yeah.
I gotta love the brass balls on her for sending the letter like that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Vicki was extremely radicalized.
It's not even just that. It's that what you've done very clearly is you have taken people and backed them into a corner. And they know they're backed into a corner.
And these are people that were already skeptical of the government, of big government, of government tyranny. They moved from corn-fed Iowa to a mountaintop in Idaho in the middle of fucking nowhere to get away from big government. And the big government comes and knocks on their door, and the big government's like, well, if you don't snitch for us, you're going to go to jail. And then they give them the wrong court date.
And then just fuck them even harder. I mean, that's the long and short of it, is they're just trying to fuck them every which way they can.
But I mean, it's just
in this mindset, 2 + 2 = 4. Mm-hmm. Right?
Well, yeah. And there's a principle in warfare that you always leave a window of hope for the enemy that you're attacking, right? That they might survive. If you hoist that black flag, right, that take no prisoners, if they know that there is no escape, they will fight until their dying breath. So you don't ever do that.
Anyways.
Yeah, so you don't ever do that because you want them to not fight as hard. What they've just done to the Weavers with these sets of moves is hoist a black flag and back them up into a position from which there is no escape. There is no way for them to find a legal route out of this, and they know it. they are now going to have to fight, and they're going to have to fight for their lives. And you've left them no way to escape that.
Right. Which was the whole point, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Already skeptical of the feds after their repeated strongman tactics, both Randy and Vicki saw this as further evidence that the Weavers would not receive a fair trial. They increasingly isolated themselves on their Ruby Ridge farm, vowing to fight rather than surrender peacefully. All right. And then during the standoff, a voluntary surrender date was negotiated with the Marshal Service for October 1991. Right. So this is an agreement between them and the Weavers. Right. Randy said, okay, I'll surrender at that point in time. But the United States Attorney's Office refused the settlement.
Yet again, those in
Why
power.
Why the fuck would they refuse it if they didn't want him dead? Like murderous intent wanted him fucking dead.
Yeah, because I mean he's giving, and that's a trend with this, is Randy continuously gave them options to just do things peacefully. Like, I'll be in on that date for court. Okay, we can do that peacefully. Nope, attorney's office doesn't want it. I'll surrender on this date. Nope, attorney's office doesn't want it. The attorney's office continuously, they're out for fucking blood.
The deputy director of the Special Operations Group of the Marshal Service, using evidence obtained through surveillance, believed that the best course of action was to drop the indictment, issue a new one under seal, and use undercover agents to arrest Weaver, who presumably would have dropped his guard at this point, right? That recommendation was also rejected by the state attorney's office.
So even the marshals, the ones whose job it is to go after dangerous felons and fugitives,
people with federal warrants,
they're like, we don't think this guy's as dangerous as you seem to think he is.
They're like, and even if he's dangerous, like, all you got to do is just make him think that everything's going to be okay, and then you can move in, you can sweep in, and you can grab him once he drops his guard, and it'll still go
nice
off
and
peacefully.
calm. Nobody gets hurt.
I mean, he would have got Lavoid, but I mean, it still would have been, I don't know, a better option. I guess.
He probably would have been Lavoid, but maybe Samuel and Vicki would still be alive.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, too, is, you gotta, if you're looking at this from the Weaver's perspective, too, like with his surrender and stuff, he's got to know that if he surrenders, or at least, be certain that if he surrenders, they're driving from that mountaintop all the way in to court. That's a long drive with nobody around, and he's got to know that he's not making it to the end of that breathing.
Yeah, but he's still willing to do that. That's
right.
And
because
it's also
his family was in danger.
It's also shortly after that that Vicki gives birth to Elishaba by herself, or her and Randy, I guess, in the shed up on the mountain, which is fucking like they were so isolated and so dug into this position that they didn't even go to the hospital for the birth of the baby.
They wouldn't have made it there.
Yeah, they wouldn't have made it there, and they wouldn't or they wouldn't have made it back. Randy would have been arrested while he was there.
Yeah. So I mean, like, they didn't go to the store. Like, they had friends and neighbors that would bring them food and check in on them. And there's one that the part of the documentary I watched was Sarah. She was talking about during that time, during that long winter, that, like, they would just sit and play board games and read books. And she said sometimes she would read 2 books in a day, like, because there was nothing else to do, right? They didn't have they couldn't go anywhere. They wouldn't go anywhere.
Right.
So they're just isolated in their little cabin. Okay.
And that's all they wanted in the first fucking place.
Yeah. Pretty much.
Give or take.
Yeah, but to have some freedom.
Well, yeah, and you notice they know, they know that there's a warrant. They know that they're wanted, right? And they're not running. They're just sitting there. They're just like, no, just leave us alone. They're still like, just leave us alone. Yeah. We're not hurting anybody. Leave us alone.
Yeah, the Weaver household grew in 1991 with the delivery and the birthing shed of baby girl named Elishaba. The Weaver children now numbered 4. In addition to Elishaba, there was Sarah, who was 15 at the time, Sam, 13, Rachel, 9. Kevin Harris, a teen with a troubled past, who the Weavers had taken in, also spent months at a time in the Weaver cabin. The presence of the children complicated the Marshal Service task, especially given Randy Weaver's practice of sending his gun-toting children out in front of him to greet strangers. I don't think that really was like his practice. I think it was just something that the kids did because, you know, they're fucking bored.
Yeah.
And this next paragraph, this is another angle of this. Like we got all this, we got the angle, we got all this government pressure on Randy, right? And on this side we got the beliefs, the religion, right? We got all these pressures on Randy and on the government trying to make this thing happen. And then by early 1992, the standoff at Ruby Ridge attracted national notoriety. Press figures ranging from Geraldo Rivera to reporters for the Los Angeles Times requested interviews with the Weavers, but the only reporter they agreed to talk to wrote for a small weekly paper in Bonners Ferry. In the interview, Randy said that the feds were more concerned about, quote, shutting our mouths than they were about shotguns. The Weavers claimed not to be Aryans or Nazis, just people who came to Idaho to, quote, escape religious persecution. But now Vicki said, quote, there's nowhere left to escape our lawless rulers. The Weavers were making the federal government look weak and silly. Pressures mounted on the Marshal Service to do something.
Well, yeah. See, and that's the thing is they not only were already defying them, which is already one of the most grievous sins for the government that you openly defy them.
Embarrassing them too.
Yeah, and now you're rubbing their noses in the fact that you're defying them, and then you're going to continue to defy them. You're not scared of them at all. And what they're terrified of is that they're going to make other people also not terrified.
And showing that you're the ones who've been reasonable this whole fucking time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
They can't have that either, because you have to be a villain.
And that's also why, you know, I think why Randy didn't want to talk to anybody but the local reporters, because he knew the national media was going to try and spin it immediately. That was all they were going to do, is try and spin. He didn't want it all to just be spun in the government's favor. And he knew that this local reporter he could trust and would tell the story the way it should be told factually.
Right.
Oh God, where'd that other paragraph go? I got so many articles with little snippets that I just where is it?
You're still more organized than I am, Jason.
No, I'm not. Let's see, or is it? Maybe it was the other article. I have 4 fucking windows open with different articles in them.
That's why what you do is you copy paste the chunks of the articles into a Google Doc.
Oh, come on now! Don't give me this information
and that
now.
Way you can just go through it piece by piece.
Or even a Word document.
Oh, come on! Who wants to pay for Word? You can just use Google.
No, I have Open Office.
Oh, yeah, you can use that too. But either way, that's what I always do. Is I just grab chunks of the articles and just slap them together in one paper, and that way I just have a cohesive narrative. See how nice that is?
Well, you're more professional than I am.
Aren't you special, Andrew?
These are life lessons, kids.
I'm too old. I just had another birthday. I'm too fucking old to learn new shit.
Fucking youngsters.
I am only 6 months younger than you, Jason.
Yeah, which makes you a youngster.
My one buddy is only 3 weeks older than I am. I still call him the old man.
Yeah. Well, my cousin is only 12 days younger than me, and she calls me old too.
Okay, I can't find that fucking thing. Either way, the point I was going to make was that the Marshal Service during this time, they were doing surveillance on the Weavers, right? They had like aerial reconnaissance video and photos from overhead planes and whatnot. They had a motion activated cameras set up around the Weaver's cabin. They had night vision cameras set up around the Weaver's cabin. They had I think it was like $130,000 worth of surveillance video and audio equipment set up around the Weaver cabin.
Over
That's
a pair
early
of
90s dollars.
Yeah.
Over a pair of supposedly illegal
allegedly
shotguns.
2 short shotguns.
Yeah, that they already knew they had entrapped them into.
And how far were they short?
By a quarter of an
I
inch.
think like a quarter of an inch on 1.5 inch on the other, something like that. But again, Randy says he didn't cut them too short, which means he knew how short what the law was.
Right.
Right. Which is what, 16 inches?
16 inches overall length.
Right.
For shotguns, it's longer.
Is 18? It 16 and a half?
I think 18? it's 18.
18? Really? For a shotgun?
I think so.
I think it's
I'll check it.
Yeah, either way. But Randy says he cut it to the length and that they were cut afterwards.
See, we don't even fucking know. We have internet access.
I don't care about the law.
Well, I mean, on top of that, though, I mean, it's also keep in mind that, like, you can, if that barrel isn't attached to a shotgun, it's just a piece of metal that you can cut to whatever length you want. It doesn't matter. It isn't until you actually join it to that shotgun that it becomes too short.
Right.
Rifle 16, shotgun 18.
It is 18. Okay. Yeah, but I mean, even so, 18 inches overall length, and that's overall, right? That isn't just barrel length. That's
barrel length.
Oh, that's just barrel? Okay.
Yep. Overall length
from the end of the
26.
Okay. So, I mean, realistically, what he probably should have done is he should have gone out of his way to really, really finish the very end of the barrel. So it was nice, and and he maybe had some shoulders on it, and it was re-blued, and all this nice fancy stuff, so that when they bring them in as evidence, he can be like, "You guys recut that."
Yeah.
Very clearly, you recut that.
On August 21st, 1992, 6 U.S. Marshals were sent to scout the area to determine suitable places away from the cabin to apprehend and arrest Weaver. The Marshals, dressed in military camouflage, were equipped with night vision goggles and M16 rifles. Deputy U.S. Marshals Art Roderick, Larry Cooper, and Bill Deegan formed the reconnaissance team, while Deputy U.S. Marshals David Hunt, Joseph Thomas, and Frank Norris formed an observation post team on the ridge north of the cabin. At one point, Roderick threw 2 rocks at the Weaver cabin to test the dog's reactions. Right, Sarah Weaver says in the documentary that I watched earlier that the dogs would regularly react to people coming up the hill. Right, so the dogs were the early alert system for them. Which makes sense. That's what dogs are for.
Yeah, damn good early alert.
Our dogs are early alert system for anybody who steps foot on our property.
Let's see. Damn it.
But I mean, keep in mind, by this point, right, where they've made this decision, they've been sieging them, like monitoring them and everything else, laying siege to them for how long?
Months.
I think it's over a year at this point.
Let's see. The arrest, the initial arrest was early 91. Right. So this is a year and a half, like 18 months at this point.
18 months.
Yeah.
It took them 18 months of sitting here spying on this family, just trying to live their lives. Yeah, making them ever more paranoid before they just even make the decision, now we're going to make a move.
Yeah. Let's see.
What a fucking waste of resources.
At one point, Roger threw 2 rocks at the Weaver cabin to test the dog's reaction. The action provoked the dogs, and then Weaver's friend Kevin Harris and Weaver's 14-year-old son Samuel emerged and chased after the dog Striker, who was running down the hill. Harris and the younger Weaver said that they were hoping that the dog had noticed a game animal since the cabin was almost out of meat. Right, I'm sure they shouted back over their shoulder. It was a deer or something. which is entirely possible.
Yeah, might be a squirrel, might be a rabbit, might be something. Like anything at this point is fresh meat. Like,
yeah,
grab what you can.
Yeah, the recon team, which was Roderick, Cooper, and Deegan, initially retreated through the woods in radio contact with the OP team, the observation team, and then later took up hidden defensive positions.
From a little kid and a teenager.
Yes. And then this is the part that I don't want to read.
It's the part I don't want to hear.
Yeah. So they took up a defensive position. The dog's running down the hill after them. You know, he's on their scent now at this point, and Kevin Harris and Sammy Weaver are chasing them. The Weavers claimed that the camouflaged marshals fired first and refused to identify themselves. Probably. The marshals claimed that they rose to identify themselves. They were fired upon by Sammy Weaver and Kevin Harris. And yet another version of events, marshals shot the Weaver's dog, Stryker, as he exposed their position, and then were fired upon by Sammy in retaliation.
Well, yeah, because you just shot his fucking dog.
Yeah. So
of the three of those likely scenarios, I am going to go with the first one as the most likely, because they're supposed to be there as kind of a covert reconnaissance team.
See now there's different versions. Like each article I have has a different variation on this. The different article says the recon team retreated through the woods to the Y junction in the trail 500 yards west of the cabin, out of sight of it. Sammy and Harris followed Stryker on foot through the woods, while Randy, also on foot, took a separate logging trail. Vicki, Sarah, Rachel, and baby Elishaba remained at the cabin. The OP team were anxious at first, but then relaxed. Randy encountered the marshals at the Y. Roderick claimed to have yelled, "Back off, U.S. Marshal," upon sighting Weaver. And Cooper said he shouted, "Stop, U.S. Marshal." By their account, Sammy and Stryker came out of the woods a minute later. A gunfight erupted between marshals Sammy and Harris after one of the marshals shot and killed the dog. I don't believe that part either, because Randy says that he encountered Harris running back up the hill after there were some shots, and then Harris told Randy that Sammy was dead, and then they retreated up to the house, and then later Randy went down and picked up his son and carried the son up. I think that's the more likely story, not the one that the marshals have, because the marshals are going to try to protect themselves.
Well, yeah, they're going to lie their fucking asses off to try and cover up the fact that they straight up murdered a child and his dog.
Well, that's the thing.
They can do that legally.
There's no dispute that they shot the dog. Right? Did they shoot the dog first? Did they shoot the dog after? I think they shot the dog first because the dog gave away their position. Right? Tactically, that's the right thing to do. Right?
Yeah, and cops like to shoot dogs because they're fucking afraid of them.
And tactically, they're super cops.
Yeah. Tactically, it depends on the dog's behavior. If the dog is being friendly and no one knows where the dog is, it makes more sense to stab the dog. But it's less noise.
That's why you.
But a dog is an unpredictable element in any encounter, so they're not going to want that. They're going to eliminate the dog.
Yeah. A later ballistics report showed that 19 rounds were fired during the fight. Roderick fired one shot from his M16A1. Deegan fired 7 from an M16 while moving at least 21 feet. Cooper fired 6 from a 9mm Colt submachine gun. Sammy fired 3 from a Ruger 223 Mini 14, and Harris fired 2 from his 30-06 M1917 Enfield rifle. In the gunfight, a shot or shots were first fired from DUSM Roderick, killing Weaver's dog, a yellow Labrador named Stryker. At which time, Sammy is reported to have fired at Roderick. It's reported that Sammy shouted, "You killed my dog, you bastard," and then shot at the guy. He didn't hit him, but Sammy fired a couple shots and then took off running. And then Sammy was reported to have turned for Roderick. After the federal agents began firing, Sammy was killed by a shot in the back while retreating. Harris shot and killed Marshal Deegan. What had happened is Sammy fired his couple of shots, And then once they started firing back, Sammy took off running. And then Sammy got zipped in the back by 2 rounds. One round hit him square in the back, and the other round almost severed his arm. The round that almost severed his arm was later found in a tree with trace DNA evidence on it. That was enough for the Bonner County Sheriff to determine, or the Bonner County Sheriff Lab to determine that Sammy was actually killed by the marshals. It took 5 years for them to prove that. So,
Jesus.
Yeah.
But they were all different makes of guns. Like it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, bullets that impact wood do interesting things and squish down. It can be almost impossible to tell what caliber it was. If it impacted
I know,
bone
but I'm
prior
talking
to...
about like entrance and exit wounds and stuff should have been able to fucking prove it.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure they did. I'm sure it was pretty obvious. If somebody gets shot in the back and it exits through the front, you know that round came in through the back and exited through the front.
Right.
Especially if it's something as small as a 5.56, or if it's something that has a tendency to flatten in a specific way, like a 45. You're going to know the exit, entrance. You're going to know the difference because you're going to be dramatically different sizes. And these guys were probably not using FMJs.
Right.
Let's see. So this is another article on this, and it actually says, then the shots began. Who shot first remains a point in contention even today. The government story is that Harris wheeled and fired first, fatally wounding Billy Deegan in the chest. Cooper responded by firing 3-round bursts at Harris, but missed him. Roderick, meanwhile, from his location further down the path, worried that the dog might give away the location of the other marshals, fired and killed Stryker. What the government stories cannot account for is how Sammy Weaver, Randy's then 13-year-old son, ended up dead with a bullet in his back. According to the marshals, they had no clue Sammy had been killed until his body was discovered. Days later, it was actually the next day, in the Weaver's birthing shed. What is known is that the machine guns were finally gathered up. To the great surprise of Cooper, who was certain Deegan never fired, it was discovered that 7 shots were missing from Deegan's gun. Kevin Harris later offered a different version of the event. He said that when Roderick shot his dog, Sammy Weaver yelled, quote, "You killed my dog, you son of a bitch," and began firing at the marshals, one of whom opened up on him with a barrage of bullets. Kevin claimed he fired at Deegan only to protect Sammy, but it was too late.
See, now it seems plausible that the sequence of events is dog reveals position, person at that position fires on dog, kills dog. Sammy sees the dog go down, sees the fire. He then fires just a couple of wild shots in their general direction, turns and takes off running. As he does, marshals then open fire, continue firing as they're running away. Harris sets up and fires an aimed shot at one of the threats to down it, to give Sammy enough time to get away. Wheels around, moves back a little bit, fires again, realizes Sammy's down, and heads back.
That's how it reads in my mind too.
Yeah, that's exactly how I think it went down.
And people are going to ask you, why were they carrying such big firearms and M16s and all this other? Well, like as we established earlier, Randy Weaver was a Green Beret. Right, so there are all these wild rumors. The documentary I watched said that the investigating marshal, when doing the initial reconnaissance report, talked to like 24 neighbors and people in the community, and he literally asked, well, why don't I just go up there and talk to Randy?
Talk to him.
Right, like, and the people were said, oh no, some people were like, oh no, he has that place booby trapped. Oh no, they'll kill you on first sight, all this other stuff. So there were a lot of things in the rumor mill that, in addition to Randy and Vicki having this deep, heavy, embedded religious belief, coupled with Randy being a former Green Beret, former combat vet, Vietnam, and you know how the fucking Vietnamese were with their fucking, booby traps and all this other stuff.
Similar to the Afghanis.
Yes.
And the Iraqis.
Coincidence?
Yeah. So there was this a lot of instilled fear,
Distrust
and that they had for going up there and dealing with Randy Weaver.
Well, and there's a Steve Earle song talking about learning a thing or two from Charlie, and who knows? So, but it's,
yes.
But that's the thing that unfortunately that's a reality of being a Green Beret, is that just hearing that government agents will immediately respond to you as if you are a constant mortal threat. Just immediately. That's how they're going to respond to you. When I got arrested,
it's to a lesser extent for all vets.
Well, yeah, but
especially if you were spec ops, yeah,
when I got arrested, I fully cooperated and everything. It would have been stupid not to. And when I got arrested, I got thanked for my cooperation. Like 3 cops were like, "Thank you for cooperating," and I'm like, "Oh, so you know who I am. All right, well, thanks for not shooting me immediately. Appreciate it." But that's it. It alters the landscape and the interaction almost immediately by knowing that somebody is trained and knowledgeable in not only the use of firearms, but the use of cover, small unit tactics, the use of terrain, all these other things.
And it's likely has some experience with killing another human being.
Yeah, and especially, if you've been to combat as Randy had been, he was not only Green Beret, he's one of the original Green Berets. Like when Kennedy first authorized the wearing of the Green Beret was in Vietnam. Special Forces was created in Vietnam, so this is like he's one of the OG motherfuckers that started this shit. And so there's a lot of intimidation for a lot of these guys in law enforcement who have never had the balls to actually do this shit. There's a lot of intimidation factor there, and you become a boogeyman for them.
Yep.
And that's unfortunately part of what's happening, is that Randy is a boogeyman. They're looking at him as this like super soldier who's going to materialize like the fucking predator out of the forest and attack them.
Fucking Baba Yaga.
Yeah, and he's fucking not. The reality is you're fucking not. All right, that's not how that shit works.
Well,
but that's what they think. So they're immediately firing without question with everybody because they have been set up psychologically to think you're going to kill them if you get the tiniest chance.
Right.
Yeah, and it's important to note that post all this, Kevin Harris, he was on trial for the murder of Deegan, cited self-defense, and was acquitted.
Yep.
So,
which says an awful lot. That a jury of his peers listened to that whole thing and went, "Yep, that was self-defense."
Yep. Yeah. So, reports of a marshal dead on Ruby Ridge set off alarm bells in Washington, where FBI officials began plotting their next moves, which included revising the agency's rules of engagement to allow agents to shoot and kill any adult at Ruby Ridge seen in possession of a firearm, whether or not the adult was presently posing a risk of immediate death or bodily harm. We'll get to that in a second. I saw Andrew. I saw Andrew peek. I saw Andrew's eyes go, "Whoa, wait a minute." I'll get to that in a second. The FBI's hostage rescue team, including the most elite snipers, arrived in Idaho early the next morning. When briefed on their assignment at Ruby Ridge on August 22nd, snipers were told that if they observed an adult carrying a weapon, deadly force can and should be used to take them out.
I want to point out from this article that I'm looking at here from the Libertarian Institute, it's that after this initial exchange, the FBI's hostage rescue team, sometimes disparagingly called the hostage roasting team,
that's
their proclivity to burn down buildings.
That's the ammo.com article. It's a reprint. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, well, they're not wrong.
They roasted. Because by the time Waco occurs, they had already burned, I think, 12. In 12 cases, they had burned and killed one or multiple people who they were sieging, because they saturated the area with very flammable CS gas, which they then ignited. This happens repeatedly with them, with the HRT. The HRT at the time, they were fucking psychopaths.
Oh yeah, the initial
at the time.
The initial training video for the FBI HRT, it starts with an explosion like an oversized explosion blowing open the door, and then them come charging in and like almost tripping over each other. It's fucking hilarious to watch, but
like that.
It's really bad.
Scene from the second Aladdin when Genie turns into all SWAT guys and they all surround his dad and do not attempt to move or we will be shooting ourselves because they all have their guns up and they're rows.
All right, let's okay. The FBI's standard rules of engagement read: agents are not to use deadly force against any person except as necessary in self-defense or defense of another when they have the reason to believe they or another are in danger of death or grievous bodily harm. Whenever feasible, verbal warnings should be given before deadly force is applied. That is the FBI's standard rules of engagement. The FBI's revised rules of engagement for Ruby Ridge. 1. If any adult male is observed with a weapon prior to the announcement, that is, they had a surrender announcement early on the 22nd. If any adult male is observed with a weapon prior to the announcement, deadly force can and should be employed if the shot can be taken without endangering any children.
Should.
2. If any adult in the compound is observed with a weapon after the surrender announcement is made and is not attempting to surrender, deadly force can and should be employed to neutralize the individual. I'm gonna read that again. Number 2. If any adult in the compound is observed with a weapon after the surrender announcement is made and is not attempting to surrender, deadly force can and should be employed to neutralize the individual.
Just with a weapon, not even pointing it. They
Nope.
can have a fucking hunting knife on their hip.
Yes. If compromised by any animal, particularly the dogs, that animal should be eliminated. Any subjects other than Randall Weaver, Vicki Weaver, Kevin Harris presenting threats of death or grievous bodily harm, the FBI's rules of deadly force are in effect. Deadly force can be utilized to prevent the death or grievous bodily injury to oneself or of another.
Which means they knew full well that Sammy was dead.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Because he's not listed there.
Hold on. Not only not listed there, but any subjects other than Randy Weaver, Vicki Weaver, Kevin Harris presenting threats of death, grievous bodily harm, the FBI's rules of deadly force are in effect. Those are the standard SOE, right? So if anyone except Randy, Vicki, or Kevin is presenting an actual threat to you, you can't fire until fired upon or in defense of someone else. Right? But if you're Randy or Kevin and you have a firearm,
you're dead meat.
You're dead.
These rules of engagement change the landscape of this operation. This op has gone from recon capture to
kill,
siege, eliminate. This has turned into a full-on military engagement in one stroke of the pen. This has now been moved into an actual military engagement. This has moved from we're trying to capture this guy and bring him in
into a military enemy.
FBI officials in Washington first discussed revising the standard rules of engagement on August 21st, 1992, hours after the killing of Marshal William Deegan. Larry Potts, head of the FBI's criminal division, and the deputy Danny Colson believed that Deegan had been shot in an unprovoked attack and that other agents were still pinned down by fire from the Weaver cabin.
Right? What are those fucking agents?
So these rules of engagement are altered due to bad information. Right? There's
whether intentionally or unintentionally.
The FBI HRT landed and set up under the pretense that it was an active, ongoing shootout with the Weavers in the cabin.
But if you stand quietly and listen, you would not hear gunshots.
Yes. Potts and Calder thought that the extremely dangerous situation at Ruby Ridge called for a change in the rules to allow snipers to shoot at the Weavers without provocation.
And here's what's going on. I can guarantee you here's what occurred. Is the 2 surviving agents, they make it down the hill, right? They come down, they return to base. Fired upon, cover up what they did, don't mention it. Yep. So-and-so's dead, right? This is what happens. The response of that agent in charge is to get really, really pissed off because how dare you kill one of ours?
Yes. And William Deegan.
So he made shit up.
William Deegan was a well-known, well-liked, and had a lot of experience.
Yep. So what happens is this is about revenge for that special agent in charge. That's what's going on. This is revenge. So he lies to his superiors who have no contact other than him and no reason not to believe what he's saying.
Right.
And so they alter the ROE based on the intel that they're getting from boots on the ground. That intel is being custom tailored to allow them to do what they want to do, regardless of what the actual situation was. Now, it's not to absolve the guys in DC entirely, but because they could have asked questions, they could have gotten specific information, they could have clarified and shown that this was wrong, but
they just rubber stamped this guy.
Yeah, they just rubber stamped it, but they are also relying, and for them, historically, they have no reason to doubt what the boots on the ground are saying. Why would they? Why would they question that? So when the boots on the ground lie to them willingly to be able to carry out revenge attacks, this is what happens.
March 1st, 1996. The 5 remaining U.S. Marshals received the Marshal Service highest award for bravery for their actions at Ruby Ridge.
God.
Jesus Christ.
And it's just too bad that they didn't actually earn those.
Stolen valor.
Well, that's the thing, is they know they didn't earn them, but they're going to wave them around with pride anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, to them, they absolutely earn them because, well, we took on these dangerous fugitives and we won and we got our man.
Yep. Okay. Here's one. I got another one.
Except you got your asses handed to you in court.
All right. I got one more note for you on these ROEs. On board an FBI jet to Idaho on the night of August 21st, Richard Rogers, who was the head of the FBI hostage rescue team, drafted revised rules that allowed the shooting of, quote, any adult seen with a weapon. Such an individual could be the subject of deadly force. He called on the phone to Washington. Potts, that's the head of the FBI, gave preliminary approval to the revision, but said that it would have to be submitted in writing before the final approval. August 22nd, in the Bonners Ferry Armory. Bonners Ferry is the nearest town. Richard Rogers briefed the HRT team about the operation. He told the HRT that if any adults in the Weaver cabin failed to respond to the surrender command and are seen carrying a weapon, deadly force can and should be used to neutralize them.
See, it's that "and should" that really gets my hackles up.
Yeah,
because
me too.
That is a far cry from defense at that point. That turns it into open aggression. That is a linguistic alteration that makes it an encouragement.
A kill order.
Yeah.
Fucking kill
order.
A Department of Justice task force in 1994, they were investigating Ruby Ridge and all that good stuff, said that the revised rules of engagement at Ruby Ridge, quote, our review found numerous problems with the conduct of the FBI at Ruby Ridge. Although we concluded that the decision to deploy HRT to Ruby Ridge was appropriate and consistent with department policy, we do not believe that the FBI's initial attempts at intelligence gathering at the scene were sufficiently thorough. We also found serious problems with the terms of the rules of engagement in Force Ruby Ridge. Certain portions of these rules not only departed from the FBI standard deadly force policy, but also contrived the Constitution of the United States. In addition, we found that these rules to be imprecise and believe that they may have created an atmosphere that encouraged the use of deadly force, thereby having the effect of contributing to an unintentional death.
May have. You literally said should. That isn't a may have. That's you did. You said should. That is an encouragement word. Should. These people need to go back to elementary school and learn the meaning of words, apparently, because should is encouraging that specific thing. If in Iraq or Afghanistan before its fall, if one of our COs had issued a standing order that said should do something that was against the greater ROE, he would be looking at an Article 15 on a good day and a full-on court martial on an average day.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah.
Because no, you do not get to encourage people to shoot people in a war zone. This is in a war zone. And you're not allowed to encourage people to shoot people. But yet, American militarized police are allowed to encourage each other to shoot at American citizens.
Yeah, the 1996 Senate report criticized the ROE as a, quote, virtual shoot-on-sight order.
Well,
yeah, it is.
It's not a virtual, it's a literal shoot-on-sight order, number one. And number two, the other thing is, even in Northern Ireland, the British Army never got an ROE that was this permissive.
Right.
Not that, they ever adhered to it, but even they didn't get anything that was this openly permissive. That just said you should do that.
So after that, I just want to keep us moving.
Oh, sorry.
No, we're going to run out of time eventually.
Okay, August 22nd, so right, this is the next day. Before the negotiators arrived at the cabin, right, to issue the order, right, the surrender order. So they hadn't even issued the surrender order yet. Before the negotiators arrived at the cabin, FBI sniper Lon Hirachi, from a position of just over 200 yards north and above the Weaver cabin, shot and wounded Randy Reaver in the back with the bullet exiting out his right armpit while he was lifting the latch on the shed to go visit the body of his dead son. Hirachi testified later at trial that the crosshairs were on Weaver's spine, but Weaver moved at the last second.
Why is he shooting?
Okay?
Because he was a male with a firearm.
But this is before the surrender order was given.
Yeah, but that's not what he was briefed on.
Yeah, he was told if it's a male, he has a firearm, shoot him, kill him. That's what he was told. And so when obviously you're under siege and you're going outside of the building, you are carrying a firearm. That is what you are going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so he goes to visit the body of his son armed, and he's shot for it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is the other part that I really don't want to read.
Well, the fact that they kept the shed too, where you can actually see because Sarah shows where the round impacted after exiting, where it impacted the shed, and you can see where it actually hit. That's
okay. I'm just going to read this whole paragraph on another article. It says, the FBI as of yet made no surrender demand when sniper Lon Hirachi's opportunity arose shortly after taking his position. Randy, Sarah, and Kevin left the cabin to visit Sammy's body in the birthing shed. As Randy reached for the shed door, a bullet tore through his arm. Right, it went through his arm and out his armpit, or through the upper back, out the armpit. After the shot, the three ran back to the cabin. Vicki threw open the door as her husband and eldest daughter, followed by Harris, dove into it. Another shot rang out. From inside the cabin, screams could be heard. What the HRT did not know was, and they would not find out for days, is that the second bullet from Hirachi's .308 caliber gun had ripped its way through Vicki Weaver's brain and lodged into the arm of Kevin Harris. It went through his arm and into his chest, actually. Like it went like through the bicep and into his chest. Right.
Yeah, because it's so he's a sniper, so he's using a hot loaded 7.62 NATO cartridge. He's firing this round without being certain of his target or what's beyond it,
knowing that there's children in the cabin.
Yep.
Yes.
For all he knows, there was children lined up on the other side of his target, and he just slaughtered an entire family.
He shot at a moving target. It went through Vicki's head, into through Harris's arm.
Yep. And it enters her head, exits her face, impacts his bicep, goes through his bicep, stops in his chest.
And she was holding her infant.
Yes, and she's holding a baby. She collapsed. She's collapsed right then and there. Randy, having a bullet, through his armpit, reached over, grabbed Elishaba, handed Elishaba to Rachel, who's the middle daughter, and then pulled Vicki into the cabin and slammed the door. In the documentary I watched earlier, the interview with Sarah Weaver, Sarah's standing right there. Sarah said that there was a shot and then she felt something hit her face. And she said it wasn't until later that she realized that what hit her face was the fragments of her mom's skull.
Yep.
And she was covered in blood from her mom. And her mom dragged inside and pulled off to the side. And that quote that I had to read, that was earlier, it said, I had to crawl through my mom's blood to get to the pantry. We didn't eat or drink much during that time. That was from an interview she gave later, September 4, 2010, in the Bonner County Daily Bee.
Well, and this is also now, so this is another escalation again on behalf of the federal government, where they've now taken 2 shots at people who were not shooting at them and were not aiming at them and had no intention of shooting at them. They've taken 2 shots. The people have opened the door. 2 shots have come through. 3 people have been hit, one of them fatally, while holding an infant. At this point, what the federal government has demonstrated is that they have absolutely no problem killing them all.
Yes,
right.
And will do so if given an opportunity.
That's one of the things that Sarah Weaver talked about in that video, was that they were afraid of the windows. Nobody wanted to go outside because she felt that they were being hunted.
Because they were. There are things I want to say about Lon Horiuchi that I will not say, but
save it for the after show.
That murderous fuck was perfectly willing to put rounds into anyone and everyone, something that he would demonstrate not long later at Waco again when he was there as well. That motherfucker deserves the deepest, hottest circle of fucking hell.
Yeah.
Yes. I can't say it better than that, but the bullet that lodged in Kevin Harris's chest, excruciating pain, like to the point where he was begging Randy to shoot him, like just begging Randy to shoot him, and he said, "Randy, give me a gun, I'll do it myself." So Kevin Harris was like really fucked up during this, and then Randy had his shot, so they bandaged him, and Randy was just out of it at this point. Sarah said that she really took over and made sure that her sisters were okay, tried to keep everybody together and all this good stuff. So that's day 2.
Well, and you gotta consider Sarah at this point. I mean, her brother's been murdered.
Her 15 at the time, yes.
Yep, her brother's been murdered. Her dog's been shot.
Her father's been shot.
Her father's laying there severely wounded. one of her family friends is laying there severely wounded.
Critically wounded is the term that they use, but yes.
Yeah, keep in mind, if you have a round lodged in your chest, every time you breathe, that your muscles are pulling on that very jagged piece of metal. That is, breathing hurts. Your heartbeat hurts.
Right.
And her mom is laying there with her head blown off in a pool of blood in their kitchen. She's afraid to go above the windows, and she has to take care of her two little siblings, one of whom is an infant.
Yeah, 8 months old at the time.
And she has to take care of them as all of this is going on. Everyone around her that's older than her is bleeding. Everybody's bleeding. Or dead. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, and it's after they go in the cabin, it's the negotiators finally get there, and they're calling out, offering the surrender and all this good stuff, and no response from the cabin. Right? There's no telephone in the cabin, right? There's no way to communicate with the cabin. I mean, they did have a radio, and they did have some local radio stations, play some pleas and things like that. They had a one of the hard lines. Right, one of the portable hard lines like the army radios. They did put one of those on the porch, and they kept trying to get someone to open the door to grab that. But they're not going to open the door because, well, last time they opened the door, 2 people were shot and 1 was killed.
Right.
3 people were shot and 1 was killed.
3
people shot. So they're not opening the fucking door, right? And then it kind of gets worse from there, but some of the negotiation efforts inspired the belief that Vicki was still alive and was key to a peaceful resolution of the standoff, backfired miserably. Notably, for example, there were suggestions by the negotiator on the third day, quote, "Good morning, Mrs. Weaver. We're having pancakes this morning. And what did you have for breakfast? Why don't you send your children out for some pancakes, Mrs. Weaver?" The Weavers interpreted the pancake idea as just a cruel joke, that they were fucking with them, expecting to die at any moment in the hail of bullets or a firestorm. Kevin and Randy composed a 6-page letter offering their side of the confrontation. Right, so that they wrote out everything that was happening.
Right, because they thought they were going to die.
Yes. So for the next 6 days, this is how it goes on. It's the negotiators on the loudspeaker in the morning. Right, it's the negotiators throughout the day, trying to appeal to Vicki's good side to end everything, right? Trying to appeal to Randy to let everybody go and to end this thing.
6 days, Jesus. This is summer, right? Like this is
late August.
Yeah, this is hot.
Late
summer.
August,
This is
basically
low insulated cabin.
Yes. With no running water.
No running water. And there's a dead body decomposing in the kitchen.
Covered by a sheet. Yes. This went on for 6 days. Sarah said in one of the interviews that I watched that they could hear them in the crawl space under the cabin, pulling things out. This is okay. So the second day when the negotiators were there, that's when they were looking at everything. That's when they found Samuel's body. They took Samuel's body down, and the FBI special agent in charge down there. We didn't even talk about what was down there either. But at the bottom of the hill, told the news reporters that Samuel was dead, and national outrage. Right, the story completely flipped at that point in the national media. The national media, right, they were previous to all this happening, as we talked about, the FBI was under pressure, right? And it was because the national media they were talking about the white supremacists on the hill and all that stuff. Why can't the FBI just go get him? Why can't the government just go get this guy?
There's a dead federal agent. They attacked, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. Yeah. So then when it was reported that Sammy was dead, the story changed, right? Because this is a 14-year-old boy. This is a small 14-year-old boy too, by the way,
Yeah, he
was only like 4'10", like 100 pounds. Right. This is a small 14-year-old boy.
Right. Not like my 14-year-old.
Yeah.
Who's like
so the national story changed.
Hours over me.
Well, and he'd been dead, and it also came out, I mean, that he had been dead since day one.
Since day one,
of the major siege. Like that came out that he'd been dead this whole time. That right out of the gate, federal agents had killed him.
Yes.
Yep.
Right.
So, but when the February 2nd or February 2nd, August 22nd, that is the second day before Vicki was killed. There was a emergency order put out by the Idaho governor, which allowed the National Guard to become there, and then the county also had some people there. There were state police there, the FBI there. There were 400 people at this base camp at the bottom of the mountain. On the government side, 400 government agents.
Your taxpayer dollars at work, ladies and gentlemen.
For 6 people and a baby.
Yeah.
In a thin-walled plywood cabin. Something like 700 pieces of equipment. Like they had big U-Haul trucks to bring in all this equipment. Like they had so much equipment they had to get U-Haul trucks to bring in more equipment.
The news cover, if you watch the news coverage from the time, and I remember watching it when I was a kid, watching it and seeing this stuff, and I didn't really know what was going on, but I remember watching it, and you'll see, all of the protesters, because all these protesters start gathering on the approach to the mountain and all over the place, and because they all live there and they're all pissed off because this is their neighbors, and then you have people from outside of the area start coming in, and it becomes national, but there's one part where live it's being recorded, and this woman is screaming at these National Guard guys.
Yeah, baby killer.
Why do you have? Yeah, well, and she's like, why do you have a tank? Why do you need a tank for those people?
They had National Guard APCs.
Mm-hmm.
Like armored personnel carriers that can't even get up the fucking mountain. But they got them there.
Yeah, there are Humvees there. There are, and keep in mind the Humvee's still new at this point. There are Humvees there. But I mean, I just remember the flatbed going by, and it's this big semi with a flatbed, and it's got a big APC on it, and in forest camo, painted forest camo, going by, and her screaming at this like captain or something in the National Guard, yelling at him, why do you need a tank for these people? Why is this necessary? Why are you bringing in all this stuff? Why do you need these trucks? Why do you need these tanks? Why do you need all those machine guns? Why is all this here? Why do you need it? And you'll notice that they didn't use almost any of it.
No, the only thing that they used was a Jeep to get up the trail.
They used a Jeep, and they used Lon motherfucking Horiuchi's rifle.
Yes.
It's like they expected like all the scary white supremacists in the area to fucking band up and attack them.
Well, that
would have made things a lot more interesting.
There was an attempt. There was an attempt by a group from the Aryan Nation. They tried to get up one of the back roads in like a suburban or something, and they did have a bunch of firearms and some long-term storage food in the back. So they did try. So there was an attempt by some people to get up there, but
not to attack the agents though.
No,
just to get supplies to the fucking Weavers.
Yes.
Yeah. But the funny thing is that they act like that, but at the same time, if you also look at the photos of that base camp, all of the defenses are aimed at that cabin. Nothing is looking backwards. Nothing is looking out. True. It's all aimed at that cabin. So if the Aryan Nation decided to mobilize,
which they couldn't even see from the camp. The camp was 2 miles away.
Yeah.
So they couldn't even see anything, but they still had defenses pointed that way.
They actually brought in, if you actually look at the photos and look at the footage, they actually brought in bulldozers to level the area that they set up the camp in. They physically altered the terrain.
It's like these fucking cops that wanted to play commando with this fucking green beret that they had a kill order on.
Yes.
Had Rambo come out by then? Rambo had come out by then, right?
Actually, Rambo had come out by then because we're about to talk about Beau Grits.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say First Blood seems to have inspired them. They're all under the impression that Randy, who by this point is, by the way, overweight and kind of getting up there in age already.
And
and a dad and everything else. He's like me. I mean, that's what happens. You eat Green Berets, we get out of the military. We're used to eating 6,000, 7,000 calories a day on a light day. And suddenly we're not doing all that work. And guess what happens? We go and we get really, really fucking fat. All right. That's what happens. Navy SEALs do it. MARSOC does it. This is what happens. Randy had already been
Navy
out.
SEAls do it while they're writing their obligatory memoir.
Yeah. But I mean, if you look at what's his face, the lone survivor, I can't remember his name offhand, but you look at him, right? He's Marcus Luttrell. He's gotten quite chunky as well. He's probably about the same weight as I am. We get really fat, man. So this guy that they're like
he's not
thinking is
visibly like a fucking commando threat.
Yeah. So
like this guy that they're thinking is going to be Rambo is probably like 250 pounds of mostly flab. He's got bad knees. Like
we'll get to Rambo in a second. Rambo, that people say that Bo Gritz was the inspiration for Rambo. Which you ever see Bo Gritz's medal count?
Yeah, I've seen his service record. I can see that.
Yeah, it's impressive. But Lon Hirachi, a quick note on Lon Hirachi. In 1997, the Bonner County DA filed a involuntary manslaughter charge against Lon Hirachi, and got a jury to go through with it. Grand jury indictment, and he was going to bring him up for trial when the FBI, it was the FBI and ATF lawyer at the time, William Barr. You guys know that name,
what
right?
a shock that former AG William Barr was involved.
Yes,
in
William
that shit.
William Barr stepped in and he's like, "Hey, supremacy clause, I gotcha." And the DA wanted to keep pressing charges, but then he lost an election. Lost an election in 2000. There was a new DA that came in, and the new DA in 2001 dropped the charges.
And that's not what the fucking supremacy clause says, even.
Yes.
And that's not what it's in. That wasn't the spirit or the letter.
In the Senate hearing for Lon Hirachi, he actually pled the fifth like 17 times or something.
Jesus.
Including when asked whether or not he knew that it was Vicki Weaver that he was targeting. I just want to point that out. When he was asked categorically if he knew that his crosshair was on the back of Vicki Weaver's head, he pled the fifth.
Yes.
Real quick, there's from the AmmoLand article here. It also says, fun little fact: Hirachi was involved in the Waco siege, which we've mentioned, and Timothy McVeigh printed up cards for gun shows encouraging people to target him. Indeed, McVeigh considered targeting Hirachi and his family rather than the federal building.
Well, no comment on that one.
Yeah, no. If anyone's interested in what ultimately happened to Lon Hirachi,
I hate that in their family impulse.
Yeah.
That fucking bugs the shit out of me.
That's not, I mean, I understand, but that's not okay. No, if anyone's curious what ultimately happened to Lon Hirachi after Ruby Ridge and Waco, the answer is absolutely nothing. The man is happily retired in Hawaii.
Probably not even his real name.
Probably not, I would imagine.
Putting that up.
But he not only retired, he retired to a tropical fucking paradise with medals for bravery from all of this.
All right. So for the next week, that's how it goes. They're crawling around in the cabin. Kevin Harris is crying out in pain. Randy Weaver's dealing with a bullet wound. 15-year-old Sarah is taking care of her two younger kids. Dead mom is decomposing in the kitchen.
Well, she's taking care. Sarah's not just taking care of the younger kids. She's also tending the wounds of Harris and her father, because her father's delirious from blood loss. Harris is delirious from pain and blood loss. They're both dehydrated as shit, because when you're bleeding that much, you need water bad, and there is no water in this fucking cabin.
Right.
There was finally a breakthrough on August 28th. when Randy agreed to speak with Bo Gritz. Bo Gritz was a former Green Beret and prominent of the right-wing views. He was running for the president of the United States on the Populist Party ticket.
That's a wonderful ticket to run.
Let's see. So Gritz and 2 other friends of Randy succeeded on August 30th in convincing the injured Harris to surrender and receive medical treatment. So Bo, there's actual video of this of Bo talking about this, and he says that he went up to the cabin, and he's yelling out, and he's standing on this rock in front of the cabin, and he's yelling out, "Randy, this is Bo Gritz," and he said he saw Randy's face, in the window, and he said Randy called out, "Bo, they killed my Vicki."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep in mind, Bo, with this interaction, keep in mind that Bo and Randy had never actually met.
No.
However, Randy definitely knows who Bo Gritz is.
I was never in the military, and I knew who Bo Gritz was.
Yeah, he's a legend now. With
40
us,
we
know.
Later.
Yeah, we know who Bo Gritz is now.
So keep in mind that for the previous week, negotiators have been calling out to Vicki Weaver. For the previous week, she's dead in the cabin for a week. They've been calling out to her, "Vicki, hey, we're having pancakes. Vicki, hey, we're having blueberry pancakes." They called the camp at the bottom of the hill Camp Vicki. All right, and then
come to find out, she's been dead since they shot into the cabin.
Yes. Another one of the points that this article doesn't mention is during this whole time, this whole week after the discovery of Samuel, there's no news coming out from the FBI on this. Right? There's reporters at the roadblock, national, local, from Europe, like from the Guardian and stuff. There's reporters, and they're asking for information, and there's no information. So the story that they're running, that they keep running, is Samuel Weaver. And then
just creating more and more support for the Weavers.
And then it gets reported. Bo, they actually allow Bo to the next day after talking. Bo goes up with the first day. So he's talking. He said that they killed my Vicki. They start talking about things, and Kevin Harris leaves with Bo Gritz, goes down the hill, and gets some medical and all this other stuff. So the next day, Bo goes up, and he goes up with a body bag and a couple of friends from the area that knew the Weavers. And Randy allows Bo to take Vicki's body down the hill, and the couple of people, like they brought up some cleaning supplies, and they go in and they clean up the blood and a bunch of other stuff, and take care of the girls, and they make them a big dinner, and just take care of the girls and help bandage Randy up and leave. And then so then it's reported that Vicki's dead, and the story again completely changes against the government. Completely changes everything. Everything is she's been dead for a week. They killed the mom of these girls the day after they killed the girl's little brother.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the media outrage, the protest at the roadblock at the bottom of the hill intensifies. There's you can see the video, and there's fear. There's actual real fear in the eyes of the National Guardsmen that are running this roadblock. There's women and old ladies screaming in their faces, calling them murderers, calling them baby killers.
Mm-hmm.
So saying that everything that they're doing justifies what Randy and Vicki believed and why they moved there.
Mm-hmm. Just keep in mind, most of the people who live in this area believe the same. I mean, this is the Redoubt. Most of these people who have moved here already believe the same things as the Weavers, which is why the Weavers moved there.
they already believe that the government can and will act like this towards some fucking citizens.
Yeah, and all they've done is absolutely 100%, vindicate all of what they've been saying for years by this point.
Yeah.
All of it. That, which is actually something that gets brought up. If you watch a lot of the historical news coverage, if you go back and watch a lot of it, it can be a little difficult to find, but if you watch it, you will actually see that even gets brought up. Like PBS, actually, that when they're covering it, even bring up that this is what these people believe, and this would seem to vindicate everything that they've been saying.
Yeah.
That this is exactly what they've been saying.
I mean, it's bad enough. It's 29 years later, we're still talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's still 29 years later. It's still strong enough to elicit like real emotion without being on the indoctrination front like D-Day or Pearl Harbor or 9/11 or anything like that.
Yeah.
Right. I mean this is, but it's still Ruby Ridge. You say Ruby Ridge to some people and you can feel their energy change.
Well, and you'll notice, what's always irked me is that you'll hear people talk about guys like Timothy McVeigh and what he did, whether you agree with it or not, that they'll talk about it and they'll say, they'll bring up, he talked about Waco and Ruby Ridge and other domestic terrorists. They'll bring up, they talked about, they're blaming the government for Waco and Ruby Ridge. And you always hear that Waco, Ruby Ridge, Waco, Ruby Ridge, Waco, Ruby Ridge all the time, especially on mass media. And yet it's like, but did none of you ever stop and consider that maybe there's a reason that these two events keep
radicalize the
up.
fuck out of people?
Yeah, like that this is why these people keep bringing up those moments, that this is why it keeps getting talked about.
Right.
Has it never occurred to you that there might be a reason?
Yeah, you're talking about actual offensive military operations taken against American citizens within the confines of the United States.
Yes.
And people learn about that and they actually start to realize exactly the length that the government is willing to go in order to get their man.
Yeah.
And then it really starts to turn people to look at things and how things are going now. You look at what happened in Minneapolis last year, where people were shot at on their own fucking porches because they were on their own property after an imposed curfew.
Light them up.
That's
what gets said in the video.
Happening.
If you listen to the video, they go light them up right before the gunfire starts.
Yep.
No.
And so, I mean, you start seeing that happening last year. And then when that got brought up, my own sister brought up to me, Ruby Ridge and Waco. It's like, yeah, what the hell do you think we've been trying to tell you?
And the thing is that these incidents just absolutely tear apart this bullshit narrative that everybody is fed throughout their most formative years in school about the rights of American citizens and how free this country is and a right to a fair trial and this and that. And even the Second Amendment, right to self-defense, things like that. People believe so deeply in these things that when they really find out what happened at Waco and Ruby Ridge, it just destroys the foundation of their belief in this nation.
Mm-hmm. So, let's see, where was I? Okay, so the aftermath. So the next day, Randy and the girls, they come out and then Randy's arrested and all this other stuff, and the girls.
It's almost like if they had just brought somebody out who he trusted from the beginning, maybe all of this could have been avoided, huh?
Yeah.
Or not try to entrap him in the first fucking place.
Well, yeah, but I mean, once you did, I mean, if you had just been like, "Hey, we just need somebody that he'll trust." To come out.
Well, yeah, it's just another avenue of resolution that they fucking rejected because they would have been dead.
Mm-hmm.
Because if dead men tell no tales.
Well, and I guarantee you, and this is the thing that I want to bring up real quick, and I know we're getting to the end and the aftermath.
Yeah, I need to get going too.
What I want to bring up real quick though is that if the media had not shown up, if the local media hadn't been there, if all those protesters hadn't been there, if all of those eyewitnesses hadn't had their eyes on it,
Randy wouldn't have survived his surrender.
No.
None of them would have been left alive.
Right.
Yes.
None
Except
of them.
maybe the little girls.
Yeah, maybe. Probably not Sarah, but the other two.
Right. That's what I meant. The two littler girls.
So, all right.
Well, and that's assuming that they didn't get caught in the crossfire in the first fucking place.
Right.
Yeah, they would have just unloaded with
maybe.
probably they would have taken a Madus on a Humvee up there and just unloaded right through the wall and killed them all.
Yeah. Let's see. After their surrender, Weaver and Harris were charged with a variety of offenses. Their trial, U.S. District Court in Boise, began April 1993 and was presided over by Judge Edward Lodge. Weaver's defense attorney, Gary Spence, rested his case in mid-June without calling any witnesses for the defense, instead seeking to convince the jury through cross-examination aimed at discrediting government evidence and witnesses. If you don't know the name Gary Spence, Gerry, this guy is a world famous litigator and like hasn't actually lost a case since like 1969 or something.
Yeah, Spence is a legend.
Absolutely legit. Weaver was ultimately acquitted in July of all charges except missing the original court date and violating his bail conditions, for which he was sentenced to 18 months and fined $10,000. He was credited with time served in good behavior. Weaver served less than 16 months and was released from the Canyon County Jail in Caldwell in mid-December. Harris was defended by attorney David Nevin and was acquitted of all charges. Exactly 5 years after the incident, that is August 21st, 1997, he was indicted by Banbury County prosecutor Dennis Woodbury for the first-degree murder of Bill Deegan, but the charges were dismissed in early October on the grounds of double jeopardy because he had been acquitted of the federal criminal trial of the same charge in 1993.
Yep.
And the prosecutor just completely seemed to forget that the Constitution exists. What a surprise.
Yeah.
Let's see. Blah, 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 blah. Where's the other part that I want to get to? See, next time we have something like this, I'm going to take Andrew's advice and just make like a...
Here's one paragraph that I really like. It's worth noting that the federal government took active steps to cover their tracks after the siege of Ruby Ridge. The chief of the Bureau's Violent Crimes and Major Offenders section pled guilty to attempting to destroy all copies of the FBI's internal report on the siege. Federal Judge Edward Lodge penned a lengthy list of misdeeds, including fabrication of evidence and refusing to comply with court orders.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Randy Weaver and his daughters filed a wrongful death suit for $200 million related to the killing of his wife and son. If it had gone to trial, the Washington Post, on the condition of anonymity, a DOJ official told the Washington Post that he believes the Weavers probably would have gotten the full amount in the case had it gone to trial.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
At a court settlement in August 1995, the federal government awarded Randy Weaver $100,000 and his three daughters $1 million each. The government admitted no wrongdoing in the deaths of Sammy or Vicki.
Of
You
course
should have
not.
just taken it to fucking court.
Yeah, attorney for Harris pressed Harris's civil suits for damages, although federal officials vowed they would never pay someone who had killed a U.S. Marshal. In September 2000, Harris was awarded $380,000 settlement from the government.
We'll never pay any. Yeah, about that.
Yeah.
He killed him defending a child from him.
Yep.
And you'll notice, again, just to go back to that he was the one who was killed. He was the one that no one thought had fired, and he had fired 7 rounds.
Yes.
Yep.
Which means he was the one firing the most at the child, which is why he was targeted and why he was shot.
He was a legit target for a defensive shot.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then as I said, 1997, they tried to indict Lon Harachi for manslaughter before the statute of limitations for the charge could expire. And then Barr stepped in, supremacy clause. blah blah blah.
Yeah, which
blah.
is a load of horseshit. That isn't actually what the supremacy clause says. And had that prosecutor had any balls and pushed it, they would have been able to go forward anyway.
Yeah.
But again, the odds are always stacked against you. I mean, always. I mean, Weaver should have gotten millions of dollars. It doesn't bring his wife back, but
Right.
it at least punches the federal government in the balls.
Yep. Let's see. In 1996, Weaver offered his services to defuse tensions between the FBI and the Montana Freemen. I don't know if you guys know the Montana Freemen militia. They were not great people. In 2000, Weaver visited the former site of the Branch Davidian Church that had been destroyed. Another high-profile siege in Waco, Texas. And then later, 2007, he was at a rally for Ed and Elaine Brown in New Hampshire, who were under siege for resisting federal income tax.
Right.
Can you imagine being Randy Weaver, knowing that your wife was murdered by Lon Horiuchi, and going to the ashes of Mount Carmel, and knowing that same motherfucker helped do that?
Yes.
Right.
So,
and you couldn't get justice for your wife. And so he was like, there's got to be some guilt there too, that they didn't manage to get justice for his wife.
Yeah.
And so the guy was free to do what he did at Waco too. Yeah.
Yep. All right, let's we're just
I
about
gotta get
time.
going.
So let's some final thoughts. Anything you want to add?
The whole thing makes me fucking sick.
Why is
I
this
might go
still
inside
relevant?
and throw up.
Let's go that. Why is this still relevant?
Well, I think I kind of touched on that a little bit.
Worse now.
Yeah, the police, law enforcement as a whole, from the feds all the way down to your local Smoky, one officer town, are worse now than they were, all those freaking years ago, almost 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's just going to continue to get worse.
Yeah.
As time goes forward, unless people just watch the videos coming out of Australia. Please, for the love of God, watch the videos coming out of Australia, because one person directing all those people in the protests to break the lines completely destroyed.
On a horse, by the way.
No, the first time they were all on foot.
No, the one guy was on a horse. He was the one directing.
No,
them.
I saw that guy, but that was the day after.
I'm on a horse.
But what we're saying is that
yeah,
American citizens in America are still at risk, always at risk
when people
of being treated like this by our fucking government.
People say our government would never do that.
Bullshit, they have and they will again.
Just obey the law. Just take
fight
a chance.
In court.
Fight it in court. Take a chance.
Yeah, both Waco and Ruby Ridge, it was gun charges, and in both cases, they were ultimately exonerated.
Yeah.
They weren't doing anything illegal at all, regardless of morality of the gun laws. They weren't doing anything even within the gun laws that was illegal. Yeah. But I mean, to Chris's point about Australia, you'll notice if you watch what gets said to people in Australia right now, a lot of it is, well, if only you hadn't given up your guns, to which my response every time is, we haven't given up our guns, and what the fuck are we doing?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Look at what Australia is doing without guns. Look at what they're doing.
France, man. France and Ireland and
I think we're complacent because we still have our guns. It makes us feel secure in ways that we're really not.
Yeah, but if we never use them, they're useless.
Guns are Linus's blanket.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing is everyone in the United States knows that the moment that somebody is at these protests and actually starts using these guns, that's the moment that the United States government is going to come in and they're going to start pulling a fucking Tiananmen Square.
Yeah.
That's what'll happen. And then they'll start going after the guns with legal means immediately. That's what'll happen. And we all know it, which is why no one's using their guns. Everyone's being fucking cowards at these protests. No one, even if they are armed, they're not doing anything, even as the cops move in. And that
because we have a president that says shit like you would need fucking nukes and F-15s to take us on.
But he doesn't tweet mean things, Dierka.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's
At
so much
least he
better.
doesn't
Still
plead
Orange
guilty.
Man bad.
Yeah, he's still orange. Yeah, I was gonna say at that last interview, he was still fucking orange. Look at me, I'm also the orange man too, man.
So, all right,
It's like
let's
4 or 5 days ago.
throw out your plug. Let's get out of here.
Buy my book. That's it.
And
Yeah.
her crochet pattern.
Yeah, that too. If you're into crochet, it's a cool pattern.
If you're not, buy it anyway. We said so.
Support a sister, would you? Yeah.
Andrew?
That's it for me. Links are in the description. Andrew.
Man, after that, like I don't even I promote beard shit and stuff, man. Like I don't even want to promote anything on this episode. I don't even want to do it. I want to do it.
I didn't want to get into it.
His links are in the description. And finally got Odyssey figured out. So if you want to see their pretty faces, not my pretty face, but their pretty faces, you can check us out on Odyssey. All our videos are uploaded there now because the Odyssey help team is fantastic and helped out this total techno doesn't know fuck person that's still talking for some reason.
Thanks, Odyssey.
So on that note, last thoughts.
Just, I fucking want to puke.
Yeah, this is
Fuck the government. Fight the real fucking enemy.
This is one of those subjects. It's just
If there's one thing that
blood
any
pressure's up.
of you, yeah, right. If there's one thing that anybody listening to this can take away, it's this one simple fact. The government is the real threat.
Yes.
Yep.
They are the ones that want to further enslave every last one of you. Whether you are a conservative, a liberal, woke leftist lunatic, I don't care.
Yeah.
They want you in chains, whether physically or figuratively, and they want to own you.
Yep.
And there is no law so insignificant that they will not kill you to enforce.
Kill you and your family.
Yeah.
In a heartbeat over. Don't think they're your friends. The police are not your friends. The DEA are not your friends. The FBI aren't your friends. None of them are your friends. Whether they're, but I've known them for years. No, when push comes to shove, they will side with their gang every fucking time, and they will quite happily murder you, pat each other on the fucking back for it, and give each other fucking medals.
Yep. On that note, before Andrew blows a gasket, support your local guerrilla fighter, get out and train, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.
Peace.